So you know how we were talking about different perspectives on animation?
Right.
You found this really interesting clip for me about American animation.
Yeah.
And it was like someone outside the U.S. commenting on it.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's pretty critical.
Yeah, it's a spicy one.
Yeah.
It's a spicy take.
And it's from a Japanese animator.
Right.
And this is their experience working with American storyboard artists.
Exactly. So it was a good find.
Yeah, so for this deep dive, like, what's our mission here?
I think we want to understand, like, what's at the root of this.
Yeah.
You know, what are the pain points that this animator is bringing up, and what can we learn about the way Western animation studios operate?
Yeah.
The challenges they face, and maybe even some cultural differences in creative workflows.
Yeah, and we're drawing all this information from the transcript of a YouTube video.
Yes.
By a channel called Clownfish TV.
That's right.
So they're kind of reacting to this animator's statement. Okay, so let's unpack this.
Well, the whole conversation hinges on the firsthand experience of this Japanese animator,
Okay.
Cho.
Okay.
And as we mentioned, her statement is quite impactful.
Yeah.
She said, yeah, being an animator for Japan, working for an American storyboarder is such a nightmare. Would not recommend it at all. The magic about anime is they let us work with the acting and our intuition as artists.
Mm-hmm.
Something frowned upon in American production nowadays.
Nightmare, that's a strong word.
Yeah.
So to me, that the immediate takeaway is this sense of restriction. Like, this animator felt like they couldn't bring their artistic instincts and ideas to the table.
Yeah.
You know, when they were working under American storyboarders.
Exactly. And she draws a comparison to working on anime.
Right.
And she talks about a certain magic that comes from being allowed to have more input into the performance of the characters and to trust their artistic intuition.
Yep.
So it suggests a fundamental difference in how creative control is valued
Okay.
between these two industries, at least from her.
Now Neon and Geeky Sparkles over at Clownfish TV, they definitely picked up on this, and they described it as interesting, and they said that it reflects the utter state of the animation industry.
Right.
So they're kind of agreeing with this animator.
They're agreeing with her, and they raise a point about the typical production pipeline.
Okay.
For a lot of Western animation studios today.
Yep.
Many studios primarily focus on storyboarding in-house.
Okay.
And then they send the animation work overseas.
Okay, so they storyboard here.
To places like Japan, Korea, China.
Okay, got it. So in essence, the American studio is heavily involved in the pre-production.
Right.
And then the execution is done elsewhere.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. So what does that create then?
Yeah.
That creates this dynamic where you have these overseas animators who are tasked with bringing to life this vision that's been laid out by American storyboard art.
Right. And according to Clownfish TV,
Yeah.
this can lead to some friction.
Okay.
They say that these animators might have to deal with American storyboard artists who are picky, fussy, and difficult.
Okay, so this is kind of their read on why maybe American productions are so restrictive.
Right. They suggest that maybe some storyboard artists have an overinflated opinion of their importance.
Okay.
And maybe even a desire to insert themselves into the process to become animation superstars.
So it's almost like the storyboard becomes this blueprint.
Yes.
That is super detailed.
Yes. Very rigid.
And not just guiding the animation, but almost dictating it.
Exactly.
So I wonder, is this a matter of individual ambition, like they suggest?
Possibly.
Or is there something else going on within the American system that leads to this very specific approach?
Right. Like, could it be about minimizing risk?
Yeah.
Or making sure a specific vision is executed to the letter?
Exactly.
So they also bring up some concrete examples of where they see the potential downsides of this approach.
Okay.
They've noticed like inconsistencies in character sizes or awkward animation in some Western shows.
Yeah, I've seen.
And they suggest that these visual hiccups might come from overly prescriptive instructions from the storyboarding stage.
Right, like it was dictated so specifically that it just doesn't translate well.
Exactly. Or maybe even unclear instructions.
Right.
So you have this disconnect.
Yeah.
Clownfish TV even shared an anecdote about communication breakdowns.
Oh, Lily.
They recalled times when animation was sent back from overseas studios to The Simpsons, and it made no sense to the American team.
Wow. The Simpsons, I mean, that's a show with a very long visual language.
Exactly. So you can really see how these differing creative approaches and communication styles can lead to these.
Yeah, totally.
And then Choa makes this really telling point.
Okay.
She remembers being told she couldn't time a character's fall 2 frames short.
Okay.
Because it didn't precisely match the storyboard.
Wow.
And she said that American animators are in danger of becoming essentially tie-down artists.
So basically just copying what's on the board.
Yeah. Yes, just rigidly adhering to the pre-established frame.
Right.
With no freedom to inject their own sense of timing or weight.
Right. Or physicality.
Yeah, into the animation.
Wow. So it's like her role was reduced to just meticulously copying
Right.
what's on the board, even when she felt
Even when her instincts.
Yeah, a slight change could improve the scene.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And she clarifies this further by saying that what American animation refers to as storyboard is actually closer to layout.
Okay, so what's the distinction there?
Well, layout focuses on things like camera angles,
Okay.
placement of characters within a scene, and the overall composition of the background.
Got it.
A traditional storyboard is more like a fluid guide to the narrative flow.
Yeah, okay.
But by blurring this line, she argues it restricts the creative input of the animator.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is that maybe there's a different core philosophy
Potentially.
in the animation pipeline. Because it sounds like an anime, storyboards might be more loose or rough.
Right.
They provide a framework.
Yeah.
But they give the animators way more leeway to make decisions.
Yeah, they can decide on specifics of movement,
Yeah.
expressions, and timing.
That magic she was talking about.
Exactly. And Clownfish TV, they echoed this point.
Okay.
They noted that in anime, animators are often given these rough storyboards, and they're trusted to make the best artistic choice.
So it's like a very different approach
It is.
to that artistic contribution.
It values the individual artist more.
Yeah. Interesting.
Starting production.
Okay, so then the conversation on Clownfish TV shifts a little bit.
Right.
And they start talking about broader concerns within the animation industry.
Yeah.
And they touch on this idea that the American pipeline kind of blurs the line between jobs.
Right.
And they specifically mention storyboard, animatic, and layout.
Yeah.
And they kind of suggest that maybe this is a way to cut costs.
Yeah, to avoid hiring more people.
Yeah, okay, so the argument here is that by expecting storyboard artists to do things that maybe layout artists would traditionally do,
Right.
they're being asked to do more work
Right.
without necessarily being compensated for it.
More work for the same amount of money.
Right. And then if the storyboard is so detailed that it dictates so much of the animation,
Yeah.
then the need for highly skilled animators
Right.
might go down.
Yeah. Less jobs.
Yeah. So it's like a system that prioritizes efficiency and cost cutting,
Yeah.
but maybe at the expense of creative freedom.
And fair compensation.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And to just kind of recap what Cass Cho was talking about, Clownfish TV points out that in Japan, storyboards tend to focus on the overall composition and the general feeling of the shot.
Okay.
So this leaves more room for the animator to bring their expertise in terms of movement, inertia, expressions, timing.
Okay. So that really explains maybe why Cass Cho was so frustrated.
It
Because if the American storyboard is already so detailed in terms of what happens and when, then there's no room for the animator to really add their own touch.
It doesn't allow them to use their own skills and interpret things.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then there's this really interesting observation
What's that?
from the hosts of Clownfish TV where they talk about this appreciation for that unique energy.
Oh, yeah.
And that roughness that you find in a lot of older anime.
Yeah, like from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Right.
And they say that maybe that came from a less defined pre-production process where animators had more freedom to experiment.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting because it's almost like now there's this pursuit of perfection.
Right.
And it might be leading to a homogenization of style.
Yeah, it's getting rid of those individual voices.
Yeah, exactly. So then Clownfish TV talks about some other issues that are kind of concerning with the animation industry.
Like what?
Well, they bring up this idea of blacklisting individuals, which would be a very challenging work environment.
It would suggest a lack of dialogue and that you can't really express criticism without fear of repercussion.
Okay. And then they also talk about the animation career subreddit.
Oh, yeah.
Which seems to be saying that the industry is in a downturn right now.
Really?
Yeah, with increased joblessness and uncertainty about new production.
Wow.
Yeah. And Clownfish TV, they point to a few different things that could be contributing to this.
Like what?
Well, they see maybe there was an overproduction of content during COVID.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then maybe there's been a plateau in subscriber growth for streaming services.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's declining attendance at movie theaters.
Right.
And then maybe there's reduced ad revenue for traditional broadcasters.
Okay, so a lot of economic factors.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, they talk about budget cuts across the board.
Yeah.
And then this increased competition from video games and social media.
Yeah. So basically the entertainment landscape is changing.
It's a very complex situation.
It is.
And then, of course, there's AI.
Right.
And they say that AI is a major disruptor in the animation industry.
Yeah, it's changing everything.
Yeah, so it's like, this isn't just a temporary slump.
Right.
This is like a fundamental shift.
Yeah, a course correction.
Yeah.
Due to technology.
Yeah, so what do you think that means for the future of different roles?
I mean, if AI can generate layout.
Yeah.
Or even do animation.
Yeah.
The demand for storyboard artists and animators might go down.
Yeah, now Clownfish TV does acknowledge that there are a lot of very talented storyboard artists out there, but it seems like they're saying that maybe this system has some imbalances.
Right, and that it might be evolving in a way that doesn't need as many storyboard artists.
Right, and they suggest that maybe we'll see more basic scripts or AI-generated layouts being sent overseas for animation, which would definitely reduce the need for a lot of storyboard artists.
Especially those working in the traditional way.
Right, exactly.
What Koshcho was talking about.
And they even compared it to the comic book industry.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Where veteran artists sometimes have trouble finding work.
Interesting.
Yeah, because maybe it's cheaper to hire newer, less experienced people.
Right.
So it paints a kind of uncertain picture.
It does.
For the future of animation.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, the main thing we've been talking about is this tension between artistic freedom and the American animation pipeline, which might be seen as restrictive.
And that restriction comes from the storyboarding process?
Exactly. And we talked about how that might stifle animator creativity.
Yeah.
And we talked about how it blurs the line between jobs, which could affect compensation.
And workload.
Right. And then we talked about these broader industry challenges like job security and AI.
Right.
So it's a lot to think about.
It is.
So what do you think the future holds for animation?
It's hard to say, but it'll be interesting to see how the balance shifts.
Yeah.
Between detailed pre-production and animator freedom.
Yeah. And what does all of this tell us about cultural?
It seems like cultural context and production philosophies really shape how animation is made.
Absolutely.
Even within a globalized industry.
So much to consider.
Definitely.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is.
All right. Well, thanks for diving into this with me.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Very insightful.
Okay. And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.
See you later.